Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're doing a very interesting video, and that's going to be on my favorite games that I have reviewed. Not my favorite videos, but my favorite games that I reviewed. And the reason why I'm doing this is because not only has my channel evolved quite a lot since I first started, but also I've noticed that, there's a lot of videos that I've done, and I mean a lot of videos, where I feel like not everyone has the time and day of to just see everything that I've done, which I totally do understand, and especially the earlier ones, because they kinda were not that great. So for anyone that has been watching my stuff in recent years, but you only watched the videos that I put out since you first came here, then this would be a good video for you to know about which games are my favorites that I've done over the years. And I'll do my best to go over them all quickly. But of course, I'm not going to be mentioning everything because, well, we'd be here all day, but I figured I'd talk about a select few, and then I'll bring up some honorable mentions as well. And yes, by the way, for next week, I'm also going to do one for the worst games that I reviewed, so that one might be a bit of fun. So, anyways, let's get right to it. So the first one I'm going to be mentioning here is, well, yeah, it's one that I never shut the fuck up about, but don't worry, I'm not going to go blabbering on about it for an hour, and that happens to be the Deception series. So yeah, for any of my longtime viewers, you know I love the shit out of these games. I'm not going to explain it, but for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically a game where you're stuck in a castle and you have to set traps on people. And it is by far one of my favorite underrated series out there that's been on the PlayStation systems. And one quick thing I do want to mention about it, and it's not something I talk about too often about the games, is that it's actually one of the very first PS1 games I ever got, next to Crash Bandicoot 2. And the thing is that ever since I found out about this game all those years ago and I played it, I was always trying to tell people about the game, and of course, every time I told them about it, they told me that, they'd never heard of it. And whenever I got someone to play it, a lot of the times, people actually liked it, and they thought it was kind of cool and unique, and that's pretty much why I love the game. So this game is pretty much the reason why I even do the videos that I do, because it actually inspired me to talk about games that not many people talk about and that are very obscure and don't really get brought up very often. So pretty much this game and its entire series is pretty much what started everything about what I love about doing my YouTube channel and why I love talking about video games in general. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say on that. Since I talked about this game enough times, and hell, I probably am going to stream it again at some point. But for now, let's get talking about the second one I'm going to bring up today, and that happens to be Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses on PS2. So remember back in the day when Yu-Gi-Oh! Games were really experimental and they tried doing different things that weren't the traditional card game? Well, this one to me is easily my favorite one out of the bunch. So this is the one where it kind of plays like chess or a tactical RPG where you have to move the cards around on a board, and then of course, it does have some Yu-Gi-Oh! Rules, obviously it has attack and defense points, and you get life points, and then you also get field bonuses and whatnot, kind of like Season 1 of Duelist Kingdom. Yeah, there's quite a lot to cover, but I think that's the basics of it. But yeah, I really love the shit out of this game. In fact, I actually still do play it to this day, even though I played it over and over so many times. But I always just love trying to make different decks with the game. It's very addicting, I find. And it's one of those games where I feel even if you're not a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh!, whether it be the card game or the TV show or whatever, there is a chance that you maybe might like this game because, you really don't even need to know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh! To enjoy it. It is just a really good, solidly made game that is very original. And the next game we got here is Kabuki Quantum Fighter on the NES. So this is an action platformer with a lot of cool styles to it, for not only does it have some really nice graphics, some good animation, and also has a pretty cool looking character who he actually fights with his hair, which is kind of amusing. But yeah, I remember the very first time I played this game was when I reviewed it, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And at the time, I never heard anyone talk about this game whatsoever, so I was like, holy shit, this is really good shit. And while the game is challenging, it's not bullshit hard, which I do think is a good thing for a game like this on NES, because as you know, there's a shit ton of games like that. But this is definitely one I can recommend for sure if you are a fan of platformers on that system. And the next one we have is Lords of Thunder on the Sega CD, and this is an awesome shoot 'em up right here. It has a heavy metal as fuck name, and it has a heavy metal as fuck soundtrack. And hell, even like the look of it too even looks like a heavy metal album cover. It's just really awesome shit. Now there's not a whole lot that I can say about a shoot 'em up since they're like one of the most simplistic genres you can get. But I do think it is a really great game on the system. Probably might be one of my favorites on the Sega CD, to be honest. And next up we have is one of my all-time favorite RPGs, and that happens to be Shadow Hearts. And specifically, I'm talking about 1 and 2, because the third one, I don't think it's like that bad of a game, but it's not on the same level as the first two by any means. And believe it or not, like back when I used to do like the ratings, like, you know, like 1 out of 10 for like all these game reviews that I used to do, Shadow Hearts 2 was the only one I ever gave a 10 out of 10. Though, not like that really means anything, because, you know, like, I don't fucking do review scores anymore, I just think they're stupid now. But still, a really great game nonetheless, though. So, you know, it's a really dark and gritty, like, horror-themed RPG, which I think is really awesome. Has a really cool, unique setting, love the music a lot, has a really unique battle system that I think is actually addictive and fun. And it also has great characters and dialogue, which I find to be very memorable and charming. So it pretty much has everything that I like in a game like this, pretty much. And also the game is not, like, stupidly hard either, so if you're not, like, hardcore into RPGs and you want something that's kinda more, like, on the easier side, then yeah, I would even recommend it to those too, because it's actually pretty beginner-friendly, I'd say. The only thing that's unfortunate is that, well, the games are really hard to get now, which sucks, and of course, like, they're never gonna put it on, like, PSN or anything like that because of the fact that the game company is no longer around anymore, so yeah, you can't rely on Sony for everything, so that's why emulation to the rescue. But I can say that to a lot of games that are on this list due to the fact that there's just so much, like, bullshit going on with that. But anyways, though, it's an all-time favorite of mine that I always love trying to, like, get people to get into if they are a fan of RPGs. And the next one is another, like, horror-themed game, and it happens to be one on a handheld that doesn't get enough love, and that happens to be Dark Arms Beastbuster on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. So this is like a top-down adventure game, yes, kinda similar to Zelda, but instead you get guns and you shoot at shit. And there are some RPG elements where you gotta like level up your guns, you can also like create new ones and all that kind of fun stuff. And there's also just some really cool looking like monster designs in the game as well. So I always thought it was kind of interesting that they turned like their light gun game into a game like this, and it's actually really good. I really like it a lot. Probably might be one of my favorite games on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. It's a very underrated handheld that even has like tons of other games that I think are like just as good as this, honestly. And the next one we've got here is Rollaway on PS1, although it is also known as Kula World and Kula Quest. So it's a very simple puzzle game where you're a ball and you just gotta like move around all over the field and like try to collect everything and then head for the exit within a time limit, and you also get some very aesthetic music in the background. It's a really good chill and relaxing game to play with for that, like, you don't have to think about things like too much because the game actually does start out like really easy. Of course, as you get farther through it, it does get harder, but even when things do get hard, I never felt like the game got like super stressful, which is like kind of weird to say. But just like a lot of other simplistic puzzle games out there though, I find this one is like just as addicting, and I think it's just as great as like some of the other classic ones out there that are very successful. It kind of surprises me that a game like this like didn't get like so many versions later on. And the next one is a very weird and bizarre one, and that happens to be Poolirula on the Sega Saturn, although it is a port of an arcade game. So this is a side-scrolling beat-em-up with a very interesting art style and concept. So instead of like straight up beating people, you use like magical wands instead. And of course, the art style kind of reminds me of like Ghibli Studio a little bit. But as you get farther through the game, you start getting to like different stages where they have like very interestingly weird art styles. Like there's one stage in particular that looks like it's all like magazine cutouts or some shit. Yeah, it's really hard to describe it though, but you have to see it to believe it though. Like, it's pure insanity, but that's what I love about it, is the fact that it's just so very memorable and unique, and you know, you'll never really see another beat-em-up like this. But weirdness aside, this game still plays really well for a beat-em-up on the Sega Saturn. I think it's actually a really good one. And next is another weird and bizarre one, but this one's on PS1, and that happens to be Mad Panic Coaster. So this is one where you play as two kids on a roller coaster of death, and you gotta like avoid everything while also collecting and shooting at stuff. It's very simple, but man, is this game very crazy, let me tell you. It's pretty much like a punk rock game in the sense that like it has like a really like crazy art style that's also like kind of psychedelic while also looking very like 90s punk, I find. And the music in it is very thrash, but also very like hyper sounding. Like it fits the game perfectly. But yeah, this game is another one that's really fun, and it's also very addicting, but this one I will say is a little bit more on the harder side, because I do think that the controls in this one do take a little bit of time to get used to, but when you do get used to them though, I still have a blast with this game. Though, it's been a while since I played it, but I remember the last time I played it, I still had a great time with it, and I still have yet to see another game that even plays similar to this, so it's just one of those weird oddball PS1 games that you'll just never see get repeated ever again. And after that, the next one I want to mention is Bulk Slash on the Sega Saturn. So this one is both a mech shooter and a flying shooter for the fact that your mech can transform into a jet, and you just get to shoot the shit out of everything. And the game kind of reminds me of Star Fox in many ways. Not exactly like it, but it does remind me of certain elements of it though. And of course, I really love the graphics in it. I do think they still look really good for Sega Saturn standards. And the art style of like the character designs are really awesome too, for that, you know, they look like 90s anime characters, and I'm a huge fan of anything that looks like that. Plus, the soundtrack is pretty awesome too, but my favorite song of the entire OST, weirdly enough, is actually the title screen theme. Like, I just never get tired of that shit. But yeah, this is another Sega Saturn game that I would say is probably one of my favorites on the system. Like, I would actually say I like it just as much as like some of the Panzer Dragoon games. And next up is Mystic Defender on the Sega Genesis. So this is an action platformer based after an anime series called Spirit Warriors. And believe it or not, I still have yet to see this anime. It's just one of those shows that just has been on my list for a long time, and I just never got around to it though. But maybe eventually I will. But anyways though, as for the game itself, I actually think this is a really good, fun action platformer. It's nothing super unique, but I just really like the style of the game. Also, the game controls really well. The graphics are pretty good for early Genesis standards. In fact, I'd say out of all the early Genesis games that I can think of, this one really does stand out quite a lot to me. But I will say, this game does get pretty damn hard though, so it is one that you gotta keep in mind about that. But despite that though, I still find it to be very enjoyable for what it is. And the next one here is Magic Knight Rayearth on the Sega Saturn. So this is the one I took a look at in my Magic Knight Rayearth games where I just did 2 of them, and this one was the really good one. So the first thing I gotta get out of the way first, because I know a lot of you are thinking about this, is that yes, this is one of those games that most people only think about it because of its rarity, which I think is kind of shitty, because I can tell you that if this game like was not like as expensive as it was, my opinion on this game wouldn't change, because I still think it's a really good game for what it is. So it's like a top-down, like, action-adventure game, kind of similar to, you know, Zelda or Secrets of Mana or anything like that. Though I would say more closer to Secrets of Mana for the sense that you get, like, multiple characters in your party and you can, like, switch between them, and then, you know, they have different styles of attacking. And I found it to be pretty fun, even though the game is a little bit on the shorter side, but, you know, that's not always a bad thing. I mean, I don't think every game needs to be, like, over 100 hours long to be good, you know? But for a game based after an anime, it probably might be one of my many favorite ones out there, and also yes, I do really like the anime a lot in this one. And also just like the anime, the art style in this game is just amazing, and is also probably one of the most beautiful looking games on the system. But yeah, it really is unfortunate. This is one of those games that's like not easy access to people. Even though Sega Saturn emulation is good, it's just, you know, the problem is that the emulator is like very intensive on PCs. So if you have a potato computer, then well, it'll just turn to like mashed potatoes. But if you do have a way to play this one, and this is something that does sound like it's up your alley, and you want something that's more on the shorter side, then I think it's worth checking out. So after that, we got a Famicom game, and that happens to be Moon Crystal. So this is a side-scrolling action platformer, and as again, it's nothing like super crazy unique or anything, but I really do love like the way how this game looks on NES, has a lot of really awesome like animation with the sprites, but it also doesn't feel delayed either. Like the controls in it are actually like really good, and they work well with the animation. The music is really cool too. Some of them sound kind of like dark and mysterious sounding, which I really like. And plus, it actually has a pretty cool story for a simple game like this. Now, like I said, the story isn't anything like mind-blowing, but it was kind of cool that they had something like it. Like, the cutscenes in it sort of remind me of like the Ninja Gaiden ones. So yeah, I thought this was another solid NES platformer that's actually a lot of fun, and it's also not like super hard either, though it definitely does get its hard parts later on though. But it really is unfortunate that the company that made this game, known as Hecht, they never really like made like any other games that were like this, because I think they definitely did an awesome job with this one. And next we have is the Valis games, and the ones I really want to talk about is really the first one and the third one on PC Engine, although the third one on the Sega Genesis is also really good too, I would add. So they're pretty solidly made action platformers where you play as a female character that turns into a warrior princess, so pretty much like a lot of old school magical girl genre type of stuff. And you just gotta kill a bunch of monsters, and there's a lot of like really weird looking enemies in the game. There's a lot of cool settings in it, the music is really awesome too, and I really love the cutscenes in it, they're really awesome. But yeah, I would say that my most recommended ones in the series would have to be the first and the third one on PC Engine, and the third one for the Sega Genesis. But out of the ones that I have not reviewed yet, I actually did like the one on the Super Nintendo called Super Valis 4. I thought that one was pretty enjoyable, and also the fourth game on the PC Engine was pretty good as well, though it's very different from the SNES one though. But yeah, ever since I found out about the series, I always thought it was a pretty cool one. And next up we have is a survival horror, and as again, it's another one that people only know about because of the value, and that happens to be Haunting Ground. So this is a PS2 horror game that I actually like quite a bit. I don't know if I like it like as much as like some of the other ones out there, like Fatal Frame 2 as an example, but I do think it is pretty damn good. But what I can say for sure is that the story in the game was really cool. It also had some really interesting endings to it, and it also has like some amazing graphics for PS2. Like, this game could pass off as a PS3 game, and if that, I would even say that it even looks nicer than some of the launch title PS3 games that we've gotten. And plus the whole dog mechanic, I thought was pretty interesting in the way how it worked, and it also had the whole sanity meter, similar to Clock Tower 3, which is another one that I did like too. But I think I like this one better overall though. But yeah, as I keep saying, unfortunately it's not an easy access game for most people, but maybe one day Capcom will eventually do something with it. Even though it is very unlikely, but I think there's more chances of this getting like a remaster than something like Shadow Hearts though. And then we got ourselves another PS2 game, and that happens to be the Fist of the North Star fighting game from Arc System Works. So before they made Dragon Ball FighterZ, they made like the manliest anime ever made into a fighting game, and yes, it's fucking awesome. And as you would imagine, it does play pretty similar to Guilty Gear, which I think is really awesome, and also just like that series, it has a lot of metal music, which is awesome, and it also has some amazing sprite work with some beautiful animation. So like I said before, this is yet another game based after an anime that I would say is another all-time favorite of mine. And it would be pretty interesting if they did make another game based after the series and they included like more characters and whatnot. I think that'd be pretty great. And next is a game on PC Engine CD called Faucet Armor. So this is an action platformer, sorta like the Valis games, but only that this one you use a hook chain to get around. But it also borrows an element from Ghosts and Goblins where you get hit once, you lose your armor, and you get hit again, then you die. But the big difference is that this game is not bullshit hard, and I would actually say that I really like this one. Now I will admit and say that the very first time I played this game, I thought it was going to be hard as shit, but it ended up actually being a lot more easier than I thought, though still being, you know, like a fairly challenging at times, but I do think it is like way easier and much more manageable than Ghosts and Goblins though. And plus, as again, you get the really cool anime art style, you get some pretty cool sounding music in it, which I do like. And I feel like the level design really does work with the really interesting mechanic with the hook chain, so I actually really did like this game quite a bit, and I would say that it is another very underrated PC Engine CD game. Like, even compared to like other games that are very well known on the PC Engine CD, I even feel like this one still doesn't get talked about enough. And next we have Sugunai Atonement on PS2. And this is a very early released RPG on PS2. In fact, it was actually released in 2001, and it was also very close to the release date of Final Fantasy X, so this is a game that actually got overshadowed by that game. Just like Shadow Hearts, but only that Shadow Hearts was more successful than this one. But despite it being overshadowed though, I still think it is a really good, fun, enjoyable game. For that, it has a pretty unique concept for an RPG where basically your main character dies and then he is punished, and therefore he now lives as a ghost who now has to possess people in a nearby town and has to help out their problems by possessing into them. It's not very often you get to see an RPG where you get to play as a ghost, and not only that, but the game has a really cool like style to it where like it has like this like really dark medieval vibes to it. And as for the music, it's pretty damn amazing. In fact, I would even go as far to say that it's probably my favorite soundtrack that Mitsuda has ever worked on. Yes, I even like it better than like Xenogears. And the combat is pretty interesting too, where you basically just control one man in the party and you just gotta take on a bunch of enemies, but you have a lot of opportunities to attack and to like block and like defend yourself and whatnot, so I actually think it's pretty interesting the way how they made that work. Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff involved in this game, but I really do like it a lot, though, as much as I like it though, I don't know if I like it as much as Shadow Hearts and like even Final Fantasy X, but I still think it is a very solid game through and through. And next we got a PS1 game called Gamera 2000, so yes, good old Gamera getting his own game, and it's actually a really awesome one too. It's basically like Panzer Dragoon, but if it was on PS1, so sort of like Omega Boost, but only that this one actually has like a dragon turtle in it. And the game is just a blast to play. Like, there's actually been times where I've actually played this game like multiple times in a day just because I just never got tired of it. It's just that great of a game. But I suppose I should also mention that this game also does have, like, English voices in it for within the cutscenes, and yeah, they're really cheesy as hell, but I love them. So maybe Gamera did not get many games, but I can easily say that this one is not a disappointment. It's good shit. And now we're reaching close to the end of this one for now, and yeah, it's getting kinda long, don't you think? And this is only just 20 of them, and that happens to be Growlancer 4. Now, I've reviewed quite a few Growlancer games, but I think the fourth one is probably my favorite overall in the series. For that, not only did it make many improvements over the series, like for an example, like I feel like the gameplay, it feels a lot more tighter, there's a lot more like customizations you get to do with like equipping stuff. And there is tons of content and endings to acquire throughout the game too. Like, there is so much content and replay value within this game that, like, I don't think I can do it justice by even just talking about it within here. But yeah, if you happen to love tactical RPGs or anything involving like a lot of strategy involved, then I can definitely recommend this one. But even if you're not huge into tactical RPGs, I do feel like this game almost does feel like a regular turn-based RPG, but you just gotta move your characters around on like the field, sort of. Because it's not like Fire Emblem where you just take turns like all the time, instead everything's always moving in real time, so it actually makes all the battles feel a lot quicker. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I love this series so much, outside of the, you know, like the art style being done by one of my favorite Japanese artists. And as for the final game I'm going to be mentioning in this video, happens to be Watch and Rotor on the Sega Saturn. So this one is a more traditional style tactical RPG that takes place in a really awesome setting where it's like a steampunk world that's very dark and gritty looking. And even though the game still has not received a fan translation yet, there is a guide that actually translated all the story and everything, and I gotta say, the story in this game is actually really great too. But if it ever does get a fan translation for real though, I'll be gladly to play it again, because I really did enjoy this game a hell of a lot. It might actually be one of my favorite RPGs on the Sega Saturn. And like I always do mention when I talk about this game, the soundtrack is highly recommended. If you love prog rock or anything like that, you'll definitely love it here. So yeah, there's an example of some of my top favorite games that I've reviewed on my channel over the years. For those that are new here, but maybe have not seen like everything that I've ever done. And honestly, I think even just like doing exactly what I've done now was probably better than some of my earlier videos. But hey, that's okay. Everything's always like improving as we go on further, right? So before we end it, I do want to mention some quick honorable mentions. So for examples, we have ones like Galarians on PS1. It's a survival horror game where you play as a kid with telekinetic powers. And then there's Metal Slayer Glory, a visual novel, which is something something I don't really cover very often, but I thought that one was really good. And then there's the Art and Elco series, though, and specifically, I would say that the first one is still my favorite one in the series, but of course, the soundtrack and all the games are amazing. I can definitely recommend you listening to that. And then there's the Macross Shoot 'em Up on the Super Famicom. I think it's called Scrambled Valkyrie, if I remember right. Yeah, that one is just a really awesome shoot 'em up. Definitely a favorite of mine on the Super Nintendo. And then there's Front Mission 3, a PS1 tactical RPG with mechs. That one is really good too, though it's been a long time since I've played it. And then we got another one being Sayuki Journey West, but only that this one is based after the Journey to the West story. And then there's Chain Dive on PS2, a pretty unique action platformer that was Japan only. And then there's Team Buddies, which is also a pretty unique one where it's like a real-time strategy meets like a top-down shooter. Very cool. And then there's Summer Assault, which is a TurboGrafx 16 game that was done by Atlas of all people, and it happens to be like a shoot 'em up, but you're using like a slinky with guns on it. Like, how fucking awesome is that? And then there's Pieces on Super Nintendo. It's like a puzzle battler game, but instead you do jigsaw puzzles. It's very different, but that's kind of why I like it. And also, I like jigsaw puzzles personally, so I actually enjoyed this game probably a lot more than most people would. And then finally, I'll mention for honorable mentions is Samurai Kid on the Game Boy Color. And it's an action platformer with some puzzle elements to it, and it happens to be published by Koei, which is something that they never really do much, but I actually thought it was a really good, enjoyable game. So yeah, that's everything I gotta mention for today. So, as I said, I can't mention everything I ever reviewed, but that's like a good portion of it. And I'll see you next time, so thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.